Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 34 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And it's Wednesday night, so you know what that means. It means that we're hanging out with the Kane Historic Preservation Society. And tonight, Matt Boyer, who is going to be a junior in Kane High School this upcoming school year, shares the story of the submarine that came to Kane in 1943, how it got here. He talks a little bit about the war in Pearl Harbor to give us context, and then he'll talk about how it came to Kane, who showed up, and what it meant for the town. So I'm gonna go ahead and get around. We're gonna walk over here and say hello. Hello, Matt.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
All right, how about you? Okay.
Good. Thank you so much for doing this with us tonight.
Of course, anytime.
Okay, so you have a pretty interesting story to share with us that maybe some people don't even know happened.
Well, a lot of people don't. I like to call it one of those unknown mysteries of the town. And what it is, it's called the HA-19 submarine. And it was a Japanese submarine that came to the town in 1943. And really, we didn't know about anything like this happening in the town until in 2016. The Historic Society acquired a box of negatives that were part of the James Henrietta collection. And inside was one that was entitled Jap Sub. And we pulled it out to find this picture of a submarine on Field Street with about 1,000 or so people surrounding it.
So you see this picture of the submarine with all these people, and you had no idea.
Nothing at all, but that happens all the time here at the Historic Society where we don't know anything, but you know what? We go along, we find out what we can, and go on from there with trying to piece together history and bring it more to life. So
how exciting. You guys really are detectives. So you were tasked with the job to figure out the story behind this picture.
Yeah, that night John comes into the front room. I was trying to see what I could find already, and he's like, okay, you know what? Find it what you can about this. I want a full report by next board meeting. So you got till then.
So you took it pretty seriously, I think.
Well, when it's come from John, it's half serious, but...
Well, I'm excited to hear how the submarine got from the waters where World War II was happening up to Kane, PA. So where are you going to start?
Well, the story of the HA-19 all starts on the day of infamy, December 7th, 1941, the day of Pearl Harbor. And everybody always knows it as the day that the Japanese attacked by planes, where they tried to destroy our entire Pacific fleet. They weren't completely successful because some ships survived, especially our carriers, but destroyed so many. Though it wasn't just planes that came after the ships in Pearl Harbor. It originally started with subs that began the attack. And in the early mornings, when the sun was starting to come up, 5 submarines were hard charging right towards the entrance to the harbor. And one of the destroyers was out patrolling the harbor entrance and spotted one, fired upon it, and destroyed it. And the remains of that sub still sit on the harbor. The other 4 were coming towards the entrance, but ran aground on a coral reef just outside. And here, they were suicide submarines. They were supposed to go into the harbor, fire 2 torpedoes each, and then the captain and first mate were supposed to commit suicide. That was their plan. These were just supposed to destroy the ships and be done, all together. So none of them did their job. They tried, didn't work out. With the sub that came to Kane, it tried to fire, didn't work because of it running against that reef. It just wouldn't have been able to be far enough to hit our ships. So what happened was the captain, he actually abandoned ship and was captured and taken as a prisoner of war there at Pearl Harbor. Not many people know that we did take prisoners of war there. Most people know it was shoot to kill the Japs. Well, the first mate did commit suicide along with the rest of the captains and crew of the other subs that ran aground. Now, we didn't know about these subs. The United States didn't really know that they were there until almost a year after Pearl Harbor happened. It was in October of 1942 that they were scouring the harbor floor for any remains of anything that they'd be able to rise up from the watery grave, and they find these submarines just lying there. And here, the government and the military decided it'd be a great idea to take 2 out of these 4 subs, raise them from their watery graves, and take them on war bond tours.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say a war bond tour?
So a war bond tour is a tour of some item that goes around the United States sponsoring war bonds, which was the way on how people were. It was pretty much a change of instead of using physical money as your coins and your dollar bills to little bond stamps, you had your booklets that would get you different things such as your milk, your sugar, your meats, stuff like that. Those are types of war bonds that they would have.
So this idea was to take the submarine on tour of the United States to raise money for war bonds.
Yeah.
It was a fundraiser, basically.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Okay.
So in 1942, this sub, known as the HA-19, and its sister, the M-16, were risen from the watery graves of Pearl Harbor, though they were both risen in two different ways. The M-16 was risen first and was strapped to the side of a boat and brought in, while the HA-19, they actually had ropes, and they had about probably 50 so men trying to pull it out from the bottom of the harbor out onto the sand. So that would have taken a lot of strength. So they were brought out, and then they were taken by ship to San Francisco Harbor, where they sat there, and two specially made trucks came for them, picked them up, and these two subs started on their way going up north through Oregon and Washington. They split up in Washington. The other sub goes off through the northern states. Don't know what happened to it. Probably scrapped or something. But the HA-19 came back down through the west coast, down through California, and it then starts its main tour, going through Los Angeles, going through San Francisco on its actual tour, moving its way down through some of the southern states, going through Nevada, including Reno, Las Vegas area, going through Phoenix, Arizona, moving into Texas. Texas seemed to be one of the big places, but that's probably because it's one of our biggest states. Stopping in San Antonio, it stopped in front of the Alamo and was just across from the Riverwalk, so the most well-known place in San Antonio, and it was there for about a day. It then moved on to Austin, which is the capital, going over to Fredericksburg in front of the NIMS building, which that'll come important later, and then going on through Dallas and moving its way on into New Orleans. Went down throughout the southern part of Louisiana, and then came up, went through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi area, and then went down one side of Florida and up the other, stopping in places as Tampa, Miami, the Keys, all kinds of different places. Goes up through South and North Carolina, stopping in Charleston, many other towns, and then through Virginia, stopping different places like Virginia Beach, Winchester, and then it goes on into the District of Columbia. And it actually sat in front of the United States Capitol building. And that's the ultimate picture that I love to see, is this submarine standing in front of the House of Freedom and the House of Liberty of the United States. Because this was, after all, a ship of our enemy. Mm-hmm. And yet there it stands in front of the entire United States. So after Washington, it goes up through Maryland, going through Baltimore, a few other different towns. And you would think that it'd be going up the east side because of where it was at, but instead it actually turned and then went towards the west of Pennsylvania. Goes up and goes through Du Bois, through Punxsutawney area, Clearfield area, and then it was going for Bradford. It was over in Bradford on the 15th of June, 1943, and the next day it was coming to Kane. And there was a committee that was formed a while back to try and bring the sub to Kane, and one of the members was a man by the name of A.C. Howe, H-A-U. And surprisingly enough, that was Dick Blythe's grandfather. Mm-hmm. So it was another great connection to try and find that out. Dick actually found it out from his mother. So we were able to connect it with another member of the Historical Society and bring it as a more hometown thing. So it was supposed to arrive at 10:30 in the morning of the 16th of June, 1943, and it was going to leave at 11 o'clock. It didn't arrive on time. It was 20 minutes late from Bradford because of all the hills, and being this such a big sub on a specially made truck, it had to take its time.
Do you happen to know how big the sub was, how long it was? Or a guess at all?
I would probably say around, probably, you You're probably looking at about a quarter of a football field, something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, so to go from Bradford to Kane with all of those hills, that
Yeah.
would definitely take some time. So
It was a
delayed.
big sub because it did take up a good amount of Field Street when it came to Kane. It was brought into the town probably around Biddle, turned on to Edgar James, or whatever Edgar James was called before then, turned on to Greaves, and then on to Fraley. And it's very interesting, and we don't even know how they did, to try and get the truck, which turned onto Field from Fraley Street, because of that being such a sharp and very small turn. To get such a big item without hitting anything, that's a surprise to us.
Yeah, and it took up most of Field Street.
Yeah.
So it was a very
Yeah.
big.
It came down, and now, like I said, there was a committee that was formed, and they were charging admission for this, and that helped out with the war bonds. And by doing so, they charged $1 for adults and 25 cents for kids. And I wish those prices were still around for stuff that we had today. I would love that. But surprisingly enough, they raised over $1,000.
Wow.
Around $1,655.25 to be exact. And that's a lot for that time, because you're thinking most of the money's going towards the war. People are living off ration books, and they're just trying to get a little bit to survive while we were fighting this ultimate war on both the European front and on the Pacific theater.
So they really wanted to come and show up and support their country. How many people do you think were out for the sub to see it that day in Kane?
I want to say probably over 2,000.
That's a lot.
It is,
That's a big
especially when you
turnout.
think of Field Street being such a small street with limited space, but there were a lot of people there, so you'd be looking at about 2/3 of the population of the town today.
Yeah, do you have a picture that we could look at? to
Yes, I
see,
do.
Yeah. Get some.
So right here, this is from the newspaper from a Throwback Thursday that was did right before my speech that I gave on it. So you're able to see the back of the sub as its tail fins are right there, and you just see all the different people that are just standing right there viewing it. And just to give everybody a little idea, the tail fin is just up against the front of this building here, which is today Dr. Harris's chiropractic office.
Okay, and so the sign, what does it say there?
It says Army and Navy Store, next left.
And that's where the Texas Hot turn sign
Well,
is
it would
now.
be about where, yeah, that's where the Texas Hot sign is, and then the actual store would be around where the Feet and Boots Peterson Refrigerating is.
Okay. Yeah, look at all those people. That's a
Yeah.
big turnout.
Yeah, a lot of people, and you don't even see the front of the sub or even of the truck, but there were a lot of people there and a lot of money that was made, and it was a big event for the town, especially during that time, because World War II, I like to say, it was when Kane was at its finest, but also at its worst, because the entire United States was in a way at its worst. Coming out of the Depression, early years of the war, we have young boys going over, and we were just trying to survive with a little bit amount of money and doing everything that we could to put towards World War II. So it was a really hard time for a lot of people, because we even have a picture of a good probably 30 or so people standing in front of the old Johnson Meat Brothers building, just trying to get a little piece of meat for that week for their family.
Where is that building now?
That would
What's in it?
today be Studio 77. So
Okay.
it's right there at the corner of Field and Fraley. If you were standing at the corner of that and looked right across the street, right next to the Chinese restaurant, that
that's
building
where it
right
is.
there.
Okay, so June 16th,
Yep.
1943, this sub comes through to raise money for the war bonds. About 2,000 people from Kane or the surrounding area show up and raise over $1,000. Where did the submarine go from there?
Well, from there, it went back on Route 6 and went up through New York State, stopping in Jamestown, Olean area, moving its way up to Albany, and then somewhere around Albany, it turned around and came back down through Pennsylvania.
So it kind of seems like it took a little out of a way stop to come to Kane.
Yeah, it seems like that. Well, as this was just moving on throughout different places, different groups were just trying to bring this sub because they thought it would help promote the war bonds in different towns, and also it would sort of cheer up the spirits and the moral of their towns to think, we're able to capture a Japanese submarine, and meaning we could capture the entire Japanese army and win the war.
Right. Yeah, so where is the sub still around today somewhere?
Yeah. So after it went back through Pennsylvania, went through Gettysburg, Chambersburg area, it went down, and from the 40s until about the 70s or so, it was at the Key West Lighthouse. It was then moved to the Navy Yard, and it was split up into 3 sections. And then in the 80s, a group from the Admiral Nymphs Foundation in Fredericksburg found the sub there, and they found in 3 sections, and it was corroded from the salt water that surrounds the base. And here they said, okay, you know, we want to get it out of here, we want it restored and have it looking nice. So in the 90s, they finally got President Clinton to sign off, along with every member of the House from Texas that is in the United States Congress and their 2 senators, to write a letter and have it agreed by the president to take the sub from Key West under the Navy and put under the Admiral Nymphs Foundation in Fredericksburg. So it was transported to Texas, and it was taken to the Nymphs Foundation building, had a nice little small ceremony, and then it was placed in its courtyard for many years. And around that time, they actually had a ceremony for it being there around Pearl Harbor, and what's surprising enough is the captain of the actual sub came to the United States and was actually there and spoke at that ceremony. So
wow.
You're thinking, this captain was probably then only in his 20s or maybe even 19 or 18 years old when he hard charged this sub towards Pearl Harbor, and he was around in his 80s at that time or so. So given what that would be back in 43, his age, to being in his 80s and the 90s, he was there. He was able to speak about the sub, and he's unfortunately passed by now. But the sub stayed in the courtyard for a while, and then the Museum of the National Pacific War opened up in Fredericksburg. And that sub was one of the first few items to go in as the exhibit for Pearl Harbor. And it actually still sits there today in the George H.W. Bush Gallery, which is all about Pearl Harbor. So they actually have a physical piece of history that was part of the attack and something that was going to attack the United States.
And something that made its way to Kane.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Made its way
That's
to Kane,
so
yeah.
cool. So we were talking earlier about what World War II meant to Kane and like what the end of it meant.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about how we knew here in Kane that the war was over?
Yeah, well, everybody always knows that in September of 1945, that was the end, and President Truman announced, I believe it was September 10th, to be known as VJ Day, which we had already had VE Day, which was victory over Europe with the Germans surrendering. Though, when the Japanese finally surrendered, there was going to be a huge parade, and the day of the signing, it was at noon, and it was in a bay just outside of Tokyo in Japan. When the documents were signed, a message was sent out to the United States, to the White House, for President Truman to finally hear the Japanese had surrendered, and then it was covered all over that we were officially done with the war. And one of the first few ways that the townspeople of Kane found out was the bells of St. Callistus ringing. And that's such a great thing to know, because we always hear the bells ring in the morning, at noon, and at the evening. So being able to hear those bells as it was around the rest of the country, hearing church bells, fire horns going off, the fire department horns were going off here in town as well, that's what announced we were finally done. And we actually had a nice little parade sort of celebration that day, as Fraley Street was packed with people, soldiers and with civilians of all kinds. They were celebrating it, just having people drive up and down the street, having people walk up and down everything. There was kids throwing confetti off at the top of some of the buildings around the area. But what was really nice was when we finally had our Victory of World War II parade. It was the biggest parade Kane had ever seen, with a turnout of probably all of the surrounding area. Bradford, Warren, St. Mary's. You would have seen a population coming into Kane that'd probably be about 20 times the size of what it is during alumni weekend. So, yeah, a lot of people. And now at that time, the Fraley Street sidewalks were about 2.5 times the width it is today. So we were able to build risers to be on Fraley Street for this parade, and there were just people from all over that were there. And one of the few things what was nice is we actually have video of the parade coming through, and just being able to see all the different groups of soldiers, of people, all celebrating what this now meant for the United States, its future, and what will be happening now with the rest. And it was a great thing to try and see. I wish I would have been able to see it myself. For some of the, I'll say, elders of the town, they might even remember it, because it was such an amazing time for the town, and such a big part, even though we had lost so many good men from Kane. it still meant, you know, our boys are coming home, and now the United States was a superpower in the world, and now we were once again at peace.
And
so,
Kane was celebrating.
Yeah, Kane was celebrating, and
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Matt. Well, great job doing the research on that. I think it's so interesting that
Yeah.
it just started by finding this photo.
Yeah, it took me about a year to put everything together, and what was nice is when I was actually able to give my original presentation, and could have came at a better time for everything. We were originally planning to have it in March of about 2 years later. I finished all the research earlier, and I remember spending Christmas Eve working on this information, New Year's on this information. I even decided not even to watch the Super Bowl to do more information about, which that was unfortunate because I missed a good game.
You're dedicated.
Yeah.
So when did you present it?
I presented it on December 7th of 2016, the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And it was nice because earlier that day I was able to message with 2 friends of mine and our orchestra director at Kane High School, Henry Sobieski, who actually was at Pearl Harbor at that time. They were there to help represent the USS Pennsylvania, which was one of the ships that was attacked at Pearl Harbor, so they were part of that parade. And knowing that they were there while I tell the story behind Pearl Harbor back home, it made it a little bit more meaningful towards me. But it was nice because we had almost the entire chapel packed. We had over 100 people. It could fit about 175. What was really nice, we had a man from St. Mary's, Ed Kuntz is his name. He found out about this and came, and he got to talk a little bit, which this was a surprise on me that he was there. He told me that he had his military uniform, so I invited him up to talk about how he remembers the end of the war, and he remembers the sub coming to this area, everything like that. So that was a nice piece to be able to have somebody who remembers that era of everything happening in the town.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And will you remind me again, who was it? Whose photo was it?
It was James Henretta's. Mr. Henretta was the superintendent for many years in Kane, and then became the owner of Holgate from about the 20s or so till about the 50s.
And he must have had a hobby for
He was a big photographer and videographer, because we believe that the VJ Day video of just a little celebration was actually done by him. You actually can see his wife multiple times in it, so
that makes sense.
Yeah. So Mr. Henretta, you know, we have to thank him pretty much for this, because without him taking these photos and then stash them in a box for us to find later on, thanks to the donation of Jonah Davis, one of the middle school teachers, giving it to us, we would never know about this unknown piece of history of the town of Kane.
That's amazing. Well, I think it's so cool that you did such a thorough job researching that. This was a really interesting story. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about it?
Well, really, when the sub came to Kane, and just like as the town was when we finally achieved victory over Japan and over the Germans and had our huge celebration, those 2 times is some of the best times that we had in Kane. And it's because even though World War II took such a toll on the United States and took a toll on this town with the death of so many of people that were known in the town, so many young soldiers, those 2 times it brought the town together. And that's always nice when we're able to have events that brings the town together, and it's allowing people to visit with one another, renew old friendships, just be able to be thankful for where you live and help be a part of what makes this town such a great place to be living in and to be such a great part of.
And to this day, that sentiment
still is.
holds true. Yes. Awesome job, Matt. Well, thank you so much for your time
course,
tonight.
anytime.
And I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again sometime.
Or less.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I just think it's so fascinating that no one knew about this, or it was something that the Historic Society didn't really know much about until they came across an old photograph. And then someone like Matt did all the research to find out this awesome story that happened right here in Kane. So aren't you grateful that we have people like this dedicated to preserving our history? Because I sure know I am. I love these guys. They're down here every Wednesday night and every weekend. If you want to come down and see different pieces of Kane's history for yourself, you're always welcome. They're a great resource. And just thank you so much for tuning in. And a reminder that if there are stories of Kane's history that you want to hear, and we do have a list running, so we'll be getting to some of those in upcoming weeks, but we're always looking for more ideas. So if you have an idea of stories stories of Kane's history that you would like to hear, please comment or email me or send a message so that we can make sure we cover the things that you're interested in hearing about as well. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow for day 35.